What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be talking about safeties, ranking our top five safeties in the 2025 NFL draft class. It's a position group that I've been really excited to talk about. Seems like we got a lot of differing opinions. Nick and I just shared our rankings. Definitely going to be some good conversations with this group for sure. Also, like particularly important, I feel like for the Steelers because they've actually shown probably more interest than I think a lot of people really previously anticipated. They saw pro days for some of these guys, had some visits with guys like Nick Eamon-Wari, who we'll talk about in this episode from South Carolina. So I'm really excited to dive into these players. It was honestly one of the most fun groups that I've watched in this draft class, but it was also the toughest, I think, to actually rank 1 through 5 because with the safety position, there's so much context that goes into it in terms of, different roles, different schemes, like where they fit to the NFL. And I think it's going to make for some really good discussion. But first, how we doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, man. This safety group was really fun to get into. There was so many like pick your flavor types, and you talk about ranking the top five. It was extremely difficult trying to sort it out. And I'll get a little bit more into my process, but I was so big into the depth of this class, and I still think that's where the value is going to be had, especially in that day three area. I definitely think that's where teams are going to make out on this draft.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I got a good question on my mailbag for Steelers now. I was asking about, is this a draft where the Steelers need to be drafting for their needs, or is this a draft where you just draft like for the best talent? I just think for me, you always want to draft, like we talk about this all the time, like best player available at a position of need. Like that's kind of like the consistent philosophy that I have. You want your roster in good enough health to where that can be the case. But I think with this draft, man, there's not a lot of star talent, and I think a lot of like other evaluators and like people in the larger stream of media have kind of talked about that. But I just think that there are so many guys that are going to be like productive starters, and like this is a starter draft in that regard, and it really extends to the safety position as well. We'll kind of get into some of those individual evaluations, but you like the safety class as much as I do, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm a little higher on my number one than you are, and I'm excited
Mm-hmm.
to get into that. But there was an honorable mention I really wanted to get into real quick before we
Yeah.
jump into the top five. Billy Bowman Jr. out of Oklahoma. I was so tempted to put this guy in here because he is the twitchiest mover I've watched out of any of the safeties in this class. You watch him gain depth out of his pedal, and it's like he is gaining like 10 yards of depth in an absolute instant. You look at his instincts like underneath, like there's so much there with the play recognition. He can play slot because I think he used to play corner back at Oklahoma
Mm-hmm.
originally, and like he struggled a little bit there, but like he's able to mirror so well from like off coverage because of how twitchy his feet and his hips are. But this might be the absolute worst tackler I've seen in the entire group. This guy comes in like so over aggressive. Like he's not a big guy. He's like 190 or so, and he's just flying into the face first into like he's an like I would describe him as like a first team all crash dummy because he's just flying in there like with reckless abandon. And you mentioned this before we got on the show. He has like a bottom percentile wingspan, and it just shows like he has no tackling radius whatsoever, and he's taking these over aggressive pursuit angles, and it's just like I don't know if I could do this. I mean, I could
Yeah.
maybe work with you at free safety because of your ball skills, your rage, and stuff like that. But I want you as far away from run support as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned with Bowman, just some some backstory with Bowman. He is 5'9". He's 190 pounds. He has a 0 percentile arm length, 28 and a half inches. I believe that's the smallest in like NFL combine history. But you mentioned just like the ball skills. I mean, the dude is like a really, really gifted mover. He's played in the slide, he's played free safety, done a lot of really difficult things in terms of like coverage assignments. He's been like a 4-year contributor to tons of ball production. He's got 11 career interceptions. So yeah, I mean, as much as like it's one of those things where there's just like this huge trade off in terms of like he is a really good mover. really gifted athletically, but just has some severe limitations that, that was kind of why I left him out of the top five as well, more like of a day three type of grade, just because I think that it's going to be really difficult for him to get on the field just because like you can't really trust him, especially like when it gets closer to the line of scrimmage and taking on blocks, stuff like that, stuff that we'll talk about with a lot of these other guys in their individual evaluations. If I had to like give a quick shout out to anybody, probably one of the more like underrated watches, one of the more underrated players in the class, I think, is Jonas Sanker from Virginia. Did you watch him?
I did. I did.
Okay.
I really did like what I see.
Yeah, you want to talk about like a dude that's like super super physical and will come downhill and absolutely knock you in the mouth. Jonas Sanker is a dude for you. This dude's going to be an impact special teamer from day one. It seems like his stock is like pretty low. Like I'm trying to go look and see like where Dane Brugler had him. That's usually a good indication of like where this guy's going to go. Okay, so he has him inside his top 100. He's 98. He's also in my top 100. He's going to sneak in there as well for me.
He'll
But
finish
yeah,
there for me.
yeah, this is a really really fun player, the dude that just wants to hit, and I really appreciate like his demeanor. So, but yeah, let's get into these rankings, man. You want to start us off with your number five?
Yeah, I think this will start an interesting discussion. Number 5 for me was Kevin Winston Jr. out of Penn State. He's been kind of out of sight, out of mind due to the injury. Um, One of the most impressive tacklers I've seen at the college level. He did not have a single missed tackle entering the season. And a little bit of context for that game he ended up playing against West Virginia. He had already felt like a sensation in his knee, like the practice before that, and they didn't know for certain that it was an ACL injury. Turns out he ends up having it. He had two missed tackles in that game against West Virginia, and it was his only two missed tackles charted on Pro Football Focus, and you could just see it, the way he wraps up effectively, the way he drives his hips on contact. It is just a sight to behold. As a run fitter, this guy always knows where to be. Like, he fits like a linebacker. He will get in the A gap and he will show that stopping power immediately on contact, knock guys back. Like, there was a nice play against CJ Donaldson, West Virginia. This was in 2023. Like, he's got a clear shot through the A gap, and Winston just shoots right through and just meets him head on, like right on the side, and he ends up going way back. I just love seeing that out of Winston. I think his like recognition from like zone is really good. I like how he handled like crossers against Michigan. He was like really assertive with making sure the like guys didn't create like off the off like improvisation when JJ McCarthy was trying to get outside the pocket.
Yep.
And I liked seeing that with Winston. I just also think he is just physical and block deconstruction, handles hook zones well. He's a good communicator. Like, I thought he was doing a great
Oh
job
yeah.
of making sure guys were lined up in the right spot. That was something I really appreciated about his game. I don't necessarily think he's like this amazing man coverage player. I think he's a little
Hmm.
bit raw in that aspect. There are some of his highlight plays where like he gets back into phase, but he was caught like leaning too heavy, and he ends up having to work back. I don't quite think he has that recovery speed to consistently work back into phase the way he does in those moments. So I think he needs to clean it up technically. I'm not necessarily sure if he's like a one high player at the next level. I kind of view him more as like this too high guy who plays really down in the box, enforces the run game. Just he can be a force as a blitzer because I am, like I mentioned, his block deconstruction is really good, and he knows how to like get off blocks like pretty well. Not just with physicality, but also being able to like make himself hard to hit. So I like that a lot about Winston. I actually think he might be one of the safer players if you're just not talking about the injury, just based off the tape. Because if you're just looking for a box safety who can be your guy in the run game, I really like what Winston brings to the table. And honestly, the only reason he's 5 for me is because I think he's a little more like limited to like a strong safety role as opposed to like having free safety like potential at the next level. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I think he's a really good player. So I mean, I personally draft him on day 2 and reap the rewards of it.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm pretty high on Winston, so I want to save him a little bit for a little bit later in the episode.
Okay.
But yeah, I do see him pretty similarly. A lot of the things that you mentioned are definitely like strengths on his scouting report for me. My number 5 guy is Xavier Watts from Notre Dame. So really interesting evaluation because this is a converted wide receiver who's only been playing the safety position for 2 seasons. I believe they tried him out at linebacker a little bit before that, but he like produced at an elite level these past 2 seasons. Man, team captain the last 2 years as well. Very opportunistic player. And then some of these guys that rack up a bunch of interceptions at the college level, you do have to kind of read the fine print and actually go look and see like where those interceptions are coming from. Are they tip ball situations? And while there are definitely some like gimmies on his profile, there's a lot of like legitimate athletic plays that he's making, and some difficult catches too that I think
Can
like
I
he deserves credit. Go ahead.
Can I cite one in particular? There's one
Yeah.
against Northern Illinois where the quarterback is trying to throw it out of bounds and he like knows he's not going to land in bounds, so like he high points it and then he kind of hot potatoes it to the defender
Oh
next
yeah.
to him. And I was just like, "Oh, please, man, you gotta see that." Like, I just love seeing that heads up awareness. Like, just
Yeah.
a very like instinctual player. You could see that with just that type of moment.
Yeah, and like I think that's so impressive too because he's only been playing like the position for such a short period of time. I think like his best trait for me, well, I guess there's kind of two, but I think route processing, it shows up in like multiple facets. So like when he was in the center fielder area, he was consistently breaking on the ball before the quarterback's hand separates. So there's a rep against USC. It's not one of his
Yes.
interceptions, but they're running like a mesh kind of rail concept where they have this stack on the right side of the formation. They're running a receiver like up the sideline on a wheel route. And he's actually breaking on the ball before the quarterback even like lets it go. And he's able to kind of collision the ball down the field, knock it out of the receiver's hands. And I thought that was awesome. And then another thing that I really like about him is he's a really patient player. I think it's surprising because you wouldn't think that he would be so comfortable playing in reverse, right? Because he was used to playing on offense, whatever. But he just has this like next level feel, I feel like, for reading receiver body language and then being able to close on the football with his length and doing so while not like getting pass interference penalties, which was really good. He only had one pass interference penalty, I think, last season. There was another one that I thought he got there a little bit early, should have been called for. But overall, I like the click and close ability. They tried to get him matched up with some really difficult assignments, fast motion, things like that. He came through. Um, I really like that he always looks for the football. It seems simple, but whether it's him climbing the ladder or just trying to rake through the hands, he's really consistent. He's got the play strength to man up with tight ends at the next level. I really feel like that was a strength really throughout this group. Really shows up in a lot of the scouting reports I did. In terms of like coming downhill to fill the run, exceeds the requirements there, navigates through trash pretty well. I felt like um, really, I had him higher on this list originally, and then I watched the Georgia game, and then I kind of started to maybe think that some of the concerns could be, I guess, illuminated at the next level. And really, it comes down to like some of what the testing shows, I think. But just I would encourage everybody to kind of like watch that one if you want to look at him as a player. But he's
I need to watch
okay
that one.
athletically, but he's really instinctual. But the range isn't quite what you'd want it to be for a single high guy. To his credit, like I feel like he anticipates things really well, has really good eyes, but he doesn't quite have the juice to kind of compensate for those plays where he doesn't, key it early. There's a little bit of hip stiffness. He doesn't flip and redirect at like a super high level. This also showed up like more so, I think, like when he was coming down against the run. Like there were times where like some of the shiftier ball carriers could kind of get him out of sorts and kind of evade him a little bit with the ball. He was left kind of flailing with his arms. So I thought there were a couple reps where he didn't feel like, in breaking routes behind him when he was in zone coverage at the second level. That was one of the things that separated him from my next guy that we'll talk about. But I really do think he's a really good player. Obviously, safety isn't a position where you need necessarily this like super freak athlete on the back end. We've seen plenty of the best safeties in the league play with around this type of athleticism score, even if he is probably slightly below average for what you want. But Watts is a really good player, somebody that deserves to come off the board. Like I think like towards the end of round 2, if you could get a guy like Xavier Watts, like early round 3, like I would be all aboard that, especially if you need a center fielder.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the center fielding ability. Like, it's not necessarily the fact that he has like outstanding range on the back end. It's the fact that he has outstanding recognition. I just think
Yeah.
that shows like all over his tape. Like, I see him reading screens like well before they happen. I see him like consistently communicating with guys, like making sure they're lined up because he knows like they're gonna run towards that side, and he ends up
Hmm.
fitting the run at that point. That's one of the things that really surprised me about Watts. I was really expecting to go into this seeing like just a single high safety who really understood like positioning himself. Like you could see it like on plays like Indiana, like the Indiana interception where he like positioned himself just around like the crosser, and like
Yeah.
he's there to get that tip because he positions himself well. But the thing that surprised me, and this is actually why I'm a little higher on him, I have him number 2, but I'm going to go ahead and go into this a little bit.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I have him number 2, I think he's more well-rounded than I was expecting going in. Like I really like I was impressed with some of his slot coverage ability. I felt like there were some like shiftier guys he was able to stay with, and that's because
Yep.
he's very patient. He knows how to stay square and trust his technique in those moments. I also really appreciate the physicality at like the top of routes. He doesn't let receivers get their way, and I really like that about his game. That's one of the things I think kind of separates him for me between him and my number 4, because I think my number 4 struggles a little bit more with contact. But
Yeah.
I really like both of those guys that I'm going to get into eventually. But Watts, like I think he's just extremely well rounded. I
Yeah.
really admire that part about his game. I think the fact the ball skills are really good. The FBI you mentioned, like being able to position himself, the way he's able to like recognize plays before they happen. And I think he's physical taking on blocks. Like I don't necessarily think he's
Yeah.
like a huge block deconstructor, but he is not afraid to like get in with tight ends and get his hands involved, make the make the play in the backfield. Like I think he's good in that regard. And I think the
Yeah.
fact that you see like this is another thing. He understands his limitations. You mentioned like some plays on like wheel routes and like those rails. There's a play. There's two plays, but the first one it kind of breaks it both down. There were two wheel routes I remember. There was one against Travion Henderson in Ohio State.
That's a really good
Henderson,
rip.
yeah, Henderson's running the wheel route, and Watts could take like a sharper angle if he was like a faster guy. Like say if he was like a Nick Eamon Worry, he'd be able to like run straight with him. He takes like the wider angle by making sure he's positioned to like cap the over the top ability, and then he's able to like get into phase, plays the ball in the air, breaks up the pass. Like he actually gets his hand on the ball. That's what I think is so impressive about Watts. He understands his limitations, but he understands how to make up for them with
Hmm.
positioning. And I think that's something he's going to be able to do at the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like you said, I just think like the physicality that he brings coming over from the offensive side of the ball, that was probably the biggest surprise to me when I was going through like his evaluation. I wasn't really expecting him to be bad in that regard, but I thought like he was better than I would have anticipated because he's flipping positions and everything else. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, I think he's a really solid player, going to be a good starter. I feel like he has the potential to be a good starter in the league. My next player is honestly like he's one of my favorite players in like this entire class. I love this dude. I love watching him. He's like a bang the table type of dude for me, honestly is Andrew Makuba from Texas. So full transparency, like when Makuba was at Clemson, I thought the slot cornerback stuff was a little bit bumpy. Like there was definitely flashes, but there was also some like really low lows. But after transferring to Texas, like he played more as an actual safety, and I feel like he finished his career on a really high note. In my opinion, of all these guys we're going to talk about today, I thought Makuba's 2024 tape was the best of any guy that I've watched this cycle. Like there's just a lot to like, man, from a mental processing standpoint. Just incredibly instinctive. Like I said, a high level processor. Not to be like dramatic, but and I really always caution using the words like special in scouting reports. But I really think that this dude might have like special zone coverage awareness. Some of the interceptions from this past season were jaw dropping. When you talk about The Georgia game, he comes from
Yes.
the backside hook to rob a dig route from the other side of the field, makes this incredible play, leaping in midair to catch the ball. Kentucky game, same thing. The throw is a little bit low, so he's not able to actually secure it. But just such a smart football player, man. I feel like he's almost operating like he's got eyes in the back of his head. Just a really good understanding of route combinations, progressions, things like that. Just a really fluid overall mover in coverage. I think that he's somebody that really trusts what his eyes are telling him. He runs the alley with a purpose, plays like he has absolutely zero regard for his own life or long-term well-being, which I really appreciate. We'll talk about why that also shows up in the negatives on my scouting report as well. But there's two examples in the Michigan game where I thought, there was just he would close on the football, deliver a hit to jar it loose. Like he hit Colson Loveland, got the ball out on third down to force a punt. All this dude did was just make plays. Every time I watch Texas live, the tape is just as good. I'm honestly came away like really bummed for two reasons. One of which is like I just wish we would have been able to see him in this role for longer, because I feel like this was like the perfect defensive system for him to show off his abilities above the neck. The main drawbacks with Makuba are really all pretty much related back to size. He's
Hmm.
106. He's 186 pounds. It's literally in the first percentile for the safety position. Honestly, like when I watched him on tape, I wasn't even sure if he was 180. Like he looks so rail thin, man. Um, he makes some unbelievable space tackles going low on defenders, like tripping guys up at the ankles, but he can get taken for a ride a little bit, like when guys can like square him up in the hole, shows
Yeah.
up on the goal line a little bit. I think taking on blocks at the point of attack are going to be really difficult for him at the next level. He's going to have to be a guy that reduces his surface area, kind of weaves in and out of traffic, which I do think like he's already shown the capacity to do. It's going to be harder at the next level, though. I think he's really assignment versatile, but his position, like at the next level, it's probably going to be free safety. Ideally, like he's kind of a movable guy, but if he's a free safety, like he doesn't have like a ton of reps as a center fielder. So that was like one of the things that would kind of give me pause projecting him to that role. But again, it's a murky projection because he is an outlier from a size perspective. But I think that the dude plays with incredible tenacity, punches way above his weight, and it would be one of the reasons why I think I would be willing to bet on him, even if it comes to like, he's not going to go top 50. Like he's probably going to be somebody that like maybe sneaks into the top 100. But I mean, if this dude's there in the third round, like I feel like it's a no brainer for teams, just because I just feel like he's like I said, he has a potential to be like special in terms of taking the ball away, just because of some of the ways that he reads the game from an intellectual perspective.
Yeah, you knocked it out of the park with like how he works as in terms of like his instincts, his play recognition. I think the fact that like you see it in like his zone awareness and everything, I think that really can translate to more of a single high free safety role, even if he
Hmm.
necessarily didn't give us like the examples of him working in that way. I
Yeah.
think the fact you see that type of acumen really makes you feel comfortable about that type of projection. I watched a lot of his Clemson tape. I actually watched the FSU game. I think he struggles with physicality in terms of like manning up in the slot against bigger guys, which can be interesting if you're projecting him more in a slot role going to the NFL, considering how like slots are becoming bigger for the most part. I think
Yeah.
like that could prove to be a little bit difficult, but if you're asking a guy to like mirror like decently in that regard, I mean, he's got really nice feet, and I was honestly a lot of people were skeptical about how he would test. He has really good speed to like keep up with
Yeah.
guys vertically, and that makes me feel really comfortable about him as rejection. Like you said, though, it's just a matter of if you want to project this guy like to play more in the box a little bit, you're gonna feel really worried about that type of size and
Yeah.
how it could eventually, lead to durability questions at the next level, considering
Correct.
how he plays. He plays a very
Yeah,
reckless style.
and two more things on with that. One about the testing, like that was one of the differentiators between like him and Watts for me, because I think they're both like highly instinctual players to where like again, I really want them on my team on day two of the draft, and I do think that they can overcome like some of their deficiencies in that regard. I just felt like some of the lows on Watt's tape were more prevalent or more scary, I guess, from an athletic perspective than Makuba, who I never, and even honestly, like with the size stuff. I just know he's got that dog in him. So I
Yeah.
just don't think I'm curious on like whether it's gonna matter. Like he just might be that type of player where like he just overcomes the odds. Like I said, it's an outlier. You don't want to bet on those guys. You don't want to bet on too many of those guys each cycle, but that's one of the ones I'm betting on this time around. You mentioned like the injury stuff too. Like he has been banged up a little bit in college. Like he missed some games in 2 different seasons. I think both with knee injuries, if I recall. So
Mhm.
like that's one of the things. Like the dude plays with his hair on fire. It wants to hit everything that moves. I'm so worried that like we could get into his second season and he's already been on the bench 3 different times with injuries because he's trying to like throw his body full speed into a brick wall. Which again, like I appreciate, but it is quite scary. So he's
Yeah.
number 4 for you, right?
Yeah, he is number 4 for me. You want me to lead off with number 3 because I kind of want to talk about this player.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, as someone who was very early on Nicky Manwari, as someone who like saw the abilities to be able to stack with guys vertically, I mean, like watching him against Ricky Pearsall the in 2023, be able to
Hmm.
stay with him in the slot, I was like, oh my goodness, like this guy is like an insane athlete. Like more people need to talk about him.
Yep.
Like he has ridiculous speed to be an explosion, to be able to cap off those vertical routes. Like like something that was really impressive to me about watching Nick Eamon is how smooth he looked covering in the slot just off his athletic traits alone. Like I don't even feel like he's necessarily mirroring guys, but he's just like because
He's
you'll
just
see it a
vibing.
little. Yeah, he's just able to stay with them because like he can work back into phase so
Yep.
consistently. You kind of see like a little bit of like his rawness, like when he's working up against Ryan Williams and against Alabama in that regard. But sometimes this is for me like when he's working in space off receivers, I feel like his tackling is way better in that area than it is as like a run support guy. Because like
Hmm.
you see him be able to drive his hips and like go downhill consistently on these receivers. You'll see it with like him going up against Luther Burden a couple times. Like he doesn't show that hesitation when he's working against those receivers, but there's something in run support that really has me pausing. I don't for despite being like a 6'3" safety, like listed somewhere between 220 to 230, he does not block deconstruct the way I would hope someone his size would.
I feel like we're
And
sharing notes.
that's that's something that like really annoys me with his
Hmm.
game. He just doesn't quite take on the blocks the way you'd want. Like, people compare him to like a Cam Chancellor or Derwin James. I don't think he's in that or I don't think he's in that sphere. And I think people kind of view him as like this big strong safety who can cover tight ends, but I don't think like strong safety is where he wants to play. Like I don't think he's this natural run fitter. At times I think he's very indecisive trying to make his like fits. A lot of times like when I'm seeing him like try to like cap off these like runs going to the outside, he's protecting that inside shoulder too often. Like some because he'll have a guy like inside, like he's clearly supposed to be the force defender. And I guess because he feels so confident in his speed, he's like, okay, I'll protect the inside shoulder. And then if they make a break for it, I go towards the outside. It leads to him falling off on his tackles too low way too often. And it's something like his missed tackle rate is not bad. Like if you look at his missed tackle rate on Pro Football Focus, I think it's like 7.1%, which is pretty workable. I
Oh
don't
yeah,
have
it's good
issues
for a
with that.
safety.
But like you look at the angles and everything, and I have concerns about how they'll look at the
Yep.
next level. Where I'm interested to see him, he didn't get to work single high enough. And I feel like that's where his range and his explosiveness could really come into play. The problem is his ball skills, his instincts, like his play recognition, is really raw. And I feel like his best plays come as a curl flat defender, like his interception against LSU, like where he runs it back and they call that really stupid personal foul on I believe I don't know who it was, but they got him for the block on Garrett Nussmeyer, and then they end up getting the ball back. But he ends up playing the flat really well. Like I've seen him a couple times, like he knows like how to position himself to take away the high while being able to still make the play on the low. And I really like that about him. But curl flat responsibilities is not what I'm drafting a safety for. And when
Yeah.
those are like kind of like the highs of what I'm seeing, I'm like really curious how long this is going to take from a projection perspective, because I do think there are stuff there are aspects of his game he really needs to work on. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people look at Nick Eamon worry and they see the upside. I just worry about how long it might take, and that's why
Yeah.
I can't really, in good regard, put him anywhere above 3. I think there is a great chance that he can work out, but I also think there's a great chance he doesn't work out, and
Yeah.
you're caught with buyer's remorse. So I really think he's a raw player. I think he's very boomer bust in this class. There's not a lot of like true boom bust guys like every single year, but even worry to me is
Oh
that
yeah.
guy who is absolutely a boom or bust guy. I can't see it going any other way.
Yeah, I mean, we see him like almost identical, just like going through my notes, like 3-year starter. I mean, this dude, like like you said, he's been a known commodity. He was somebody that I, saw you talking about over the summer, but he led his team in tackles as a true freshman.
Yes.
He's still only 21 years old. We'll talk about that a little bit later too, because that also kind of gives me a little bit of pause. But perfect 10.0 relative athletic score, 4.38 40-yard dash at 220 pounds. Just, I mean, it's absurd. I think like what I think he does best, and again, like this is like comes down to valuation. I think he's a really strong tackler, and he's got this vast tackling radius due to his length. He doesn't
Yes.
allow a lot of yards after contact. Like he can strike people. And I just felt in general in the open field in space, like he was super reliable in that regard. You mentioned the Missouri game against Luther Burden. There were 3 separate occasions in that game where Burden got the ball like in the flat, out in space, things like that, where he was matched up one-on-one and he was able to get him to the ground one-on-one. And I thought that was kind of indicative of like his skill set in that regard. I mean, the speed and length are tremendous. It can help get him out of compromising positions, which he does
Yep.
find himself in. Maybe a little bit too much, but he is really rangy. I mean, this dude can like really roll sideline to sideline for sure if he knows where he's going. He undercut a deep over route against Oklahoma. That was like jaw dropping. He's got inside leverage. He allows
Mhm.
this receiver to kind of cross his face, runs across the field. He flips his hips and then basically still makes the interception like look pretty easy. And it's just like you see those plays, you're like, whoa. I mean, there's a play, his I guess it would be his sophomore year against Kentucky, where he shows up at the catch point too. Like he's in off coverage, is able to kind of undercut an out route in the red zone. He high points the football. I mean, he's a really springy athlete. He can
Yes.
really leap too. I didn't have his vertical jump written down, but I'm like 100% sure it's over 40 inches. So
It's over 40.
yeah, I mean, just in terms of that, like you mentioned, there's a lot of reps in the slot. Like he can cap things vertical. Clemson, he had an interception. I think that was from his sophomore year as
Yep.
well. Running with guys vertically is not an issue for this dude. Like he can really flip and burn from that regard. I do think like, with the size profile, with the length, again, tight ends shouldn't be an issue for him in man coverage. I don't think either. So, yeah, I mean, I do think the thing that you have to give him credit for is like he does punish quarterbacks for throwing in his direction. Like I do think that he made plays on the football. The ball production is nice. It's better than some of these other players that from this archetype. Now, the negatives from his scouting report are actually longer, in my opinion, than his strengths. If you take out just like talking about how athletic he is, and that's kind of like why I landed on him at 3 as well, is just because I think he's just a better athlete right now than an actual football player. The transitions can be clunky out of his pedal because of his size. I mean, there are certainly times where he is low and he really explodes out of the drive phase, but it's just not very often. He
Did
didn't
you
play a.
notice like any like reps where he's like false stepping and then like
Oh
he
yeah,
ends up
oh yeah. I'm gonna get to
stumbling?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna get to that. It's bad. Um, he didn't play a ton of split field stuff, but like he just looked really uncomfortable with like the geometry of the defense, like where the cornerbacks were where he was supposed to be. Just generally speaking, I don't think you get a good feel for like how athletic he actually could be because he does not trust his eyes, like you talked about this. He just gives off this vibe that he's like second guessing himself on nearly every move, and it drives me insane. It's like, dude, you're the biggest, most athletic person on the field. Please trigger. Just run downhill. The physicality as a tackler was adequate. But it just doesn't carry over to how he attacks blocks. And I thought that was the most disappointing part of his evaluation for me. Is I felt like he often got stuck in the block deconstruction phase. Um, I just I thought he was really like mild tempered, I guess is a good way to put it. And there's, like you said, there's a lot of false steps in terms of like there are times where he's the role safety. So he's coming down as like the late defender into the box, and he will see a crease opening up in the line of scrimmage. Like he will see the hole that the running back's about to attack through, and he almost jab steps at it like two or three
Yep.
different times. And it's almost like I wrote down in my notes that it's almost like glitchy. Like it almost looks like he's lagging. Like if you were watching like a Madden game or something like
Yeah.
he's lagging in place. And it's like, dude, just run. Just go hit him. So really frustrating part of his evaluation. I don't know, because I don't honestly, and this is probably bad of me because we both have him at 3. Having him at 3 is probably not the right ranking because, like you said, it is very boomer bust. And I just think that I struggled to find like where his best position is going to be at in the NFL. I don't think he's instinctual enough or has the vision necessary to play deep center field. I don't think he thumps the way you really want to as a box safety. Is he a slot corner? I mean, this is like a truly unique profile for a slot corner. I mean, people will bring up the Derwin comp, and I understand that because like Derwin is like his idol, is somebody like he really has like tried to model his game after. They're just different movers, man. They play with different urgency. They're different. They're totally different players, in my opinion. So I'm just not really sure that comparison is right. The one that I actually kind of came back to, and it reminded me of, was Jeremy Chin coming out of college. I think that I don't remember 100%. I remember writing him up several years ago. I don't remember if Chin had the ball production that Eamon Warray did, but I kind of landed on that as far as like that may be the comp. I mean, Chin's played multiple positions in the NFL already. I mean, he's been a starting caliber player, so he hasn't like totally busted out. But I don't know, man. I would be very cautious about taking this dude the first round of the draft, even in a class like this that doesn't have a lot of high end talent. And maybe like that's your team's focus. Like you want to search for a game changer. There's not many in this class. You want to take the high upside swing. I would just probably let somebody else do it, to be honest with you. If it comes at the price of a first round pick, it's just too rich for my blood personally.
Yeah, no, that's right around the range that I feel. Like if you were taking him in the second round, I could definitely get that more so than the first round. Because
Yeah,
for me, if you're taking him in the first round, you basically need to hit on like a lot of your safety net picks to make
yeah.
this not like a devastating outcome if he wasn't to pan out. And a lot of times when you're taking like prospects like this, you really need to plan out like, do you have the infrastructure to be able to like support a
Yeah.
development plan like that? Do you have the right coaches? Do you have the right players that can mentor him? And I think that is extremely important when accounting for where you put him on a team based board, as opposed to just like us ranking
Mhm.
him purely from how we view him from a projection and from like a perspective of what he puts on tape.
Yeah. And that's the thing too is I feel like just like reading around, because I mean he's gonna go high. He's gonna be the first
Yes.
player taken at this position. I'd bet money that he is. Just how it is. The NFL, like, it values traits over everything else, is because like when you do hit, you can get something really special. And you know, he is a special athlete for sure, especially from a linear perspective. I mean, this dude can really glide. But the things that I was just really disappointed by, I think like just reading around to like some other people, it's funny because I read some of these like evals and like scouting reports from like people that I've like grown up in the industry, like
Mhm.
looking at, seeing how they evaluate players, and I read their scouting reports on it. It's just like, yeah, I don't think that this is a player you need to be taking the first round, because, like I said, there's just a lot of blemishes in his game right now. And I'm curious about like his fit in the NFL. The one thing that I will say is I've heard a lot about like he's 21 years old. He's one of the few underclassmen in this draft. Can he get better? Like, yes, absolutely. That's part
Absolutely.
of like what we're trying to do here by putting him at 3, is like assuming that he is going to get better, because everything that I've heard about him is like, dude's a really like high character kid, like really works at his craft, things like that. That being said, I think like the slow to trigger, this like just the slow processing in general is almost more worrisome for me with him because he's played so much football already. I mean, he's played
Yeah.
for 3 straight years, and I still think that it's a rather significant issue in his game. And it's like, is that going to get better at the next level when everything happens so much faster? So I don't know. I know I'm being really negative about him, but it's just like he was a player that I watched so many games of. I watched cut ups. I watched like 5 or 6 full games of his. And it was really difficult from like a game to game basis to figure out what I was getting as a prospect. So
You
difficult
mentioned
evaluation.
the big slot stuff. I honestly felt like he was more comfortable just like reading as a like just being able to read routes, like just focus on his guy as opposed to
Yeah.
just like diagnose concepts where I feel like he just kind of like feels overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
I could kind of see the big slot angle working as crazy as that might sound. I really think that's a
Mhm.
potential option. And with how big slots are getting nowadays, there is like an avenue
I
where
mean,
I can see.
Trey Flowers has carved out an entire career doing stuff like
Yeah,
this. Like Flowers is a guy that has like that humongous wingspan. I don't know like the exact numbers of his, but like he bounces around team to team almost every single cycle. Teams put him like another guy's kind of like this a little bit is he's technically a corner too, but Shaq Griffin, like he's another guy that like people have used to kind of just body people up. And I will say this about like him in coverage, like he is physical in coverage in terms of like latching on to guys. And when he did go up against tight ends, I liked the fact that he tried to establish like a contact key disrupt routes at the line of scrimmage. So I
yeah,
thought that was another strength that I didn't mention in his report. But I do want to talk about my number 2 safety, who I guess you have him at number 1 because you
yeah,
only have one other person to talk about.
yep,
Um, and it's Malachi Starks from Georgia. Really interesting player, but 3-year starter, known commodity, kind of like Eamon Worry, summer scouting darling. I think you have to give him a lot of credit for all the hats that he wore for the Bulldogs defense, particularly last year. A lot of reps in the slot, a lot of reps in
yep.
man coverage, off man coverage, press man, trail technique, everything that you want to see there. He has the speed to like really blanket vertical shots down the field. Like guys really weren't able to like stack him on a vertical plane. I thought that was impressive. I don't remember what he ran in the 40, but I do remember that it was like a big hoopla. But speed, like straight line speed, I never really thought that Starks was a special athlete necessarily, but that was not a concern for me. And I don't think it's going to be a concern at the next level either. I just think that the interception and the high point versus Clemson to take away that ball was one of the more impressive reps that you'll see from like
Oregon game
any
too.
the Oregon game too. I mean, really, like I think he only like I'll say only. I think he has like 6 or 7 career picks. Like almost all of them were highlight reel where they plays. Like
Yep.
you want to talk about like interception production being a little bit flunky or fluky from time to time. There ain't nothing fluke that's about like any of these picks. I mean, a lot of them showcase like leaping ability, insane body control, being able to high point the football at the apex, positioning, understanding where he is in relation to the receiver, like boxing guys out. So I think he's a really light mover. One of the things I look for specifically in corners, which is basically like where he was playing a lot of last year, is like how long are your feet or your cleats on the turf? And I just feel like his feet get up and off the turf pretty quickly. Not overly explosive, but like I said, just more smooth than anything else. The first Texas game, I think, is like this is like one of the last games I watched, and one of the reasons why I kind of bumped him above even Worry. The first Texas game is like the pinnacle of like I think what you hope you're getting at the next level. Like he blows
Yeah.
up a screen pass. He has multiple great reps in man coverage out of the slot. He forced a couple turndowns, forced a couple incompletions. There were sacks, throwaways, things like that were due to like him being in the right position at the right time, filling the run from depth, being a reliable tackler. You look at the career missed tackle rates, like 6.9% in the SEC. It's really good. So yeah, I mean, he's 2 for me actually above Eamon Ward, really, because I thought his physicality up in the box just was like on display more. Like I thought he made more plays behind the line of scrimmage. I thought he played bigger, even though he's not as big as Eamon Ward is. I think the negatives for him it's kind of like a lot of what we're talking about, like projecting these guys to the next level. Like he gets caught flat-footed a ton. I'm not sure if it was like a technique thing from Georgia, but I just feel like he really struggled to mirror some of the quick twitch guys on the in and out breaks when he can't get hands on them at the line of scrimmage. I do think he can be more consistent at getting a contact key and understand like how that can help him figure out when guys are going to decelerate, things like that. Just but like the tape from last year, it just wasn't as clean. Like there's just more explosive plays on it. There's more poor games on it. Quinn Ewers, who has like a pop gun for an arm, you and I are both like notorious Quinn Ewers haters. He hit a
Yes.
whole shot to Matthew Golden with him in the vicinity, like in the playoffs, and he's playing safety on that rep. Later in that game, I mean, really, like that entire game for me, the second Texas game is a complete nightmare. Other explosives, I feel like were popped in his direction because he got caught looking in the backfield, losing track of his assignment. Some issues with him, like taking proper angles. I thought he lost contain on the edge a couple times, but I do really think he's like willing to stick his nose in the fan. So I don't want to like harp on that too awful much. But I think he's like a movable piece on the back end. He can play deep. He can play too high. He can roll down in the box, I feel like, adequately. He can also like man up in the slots, especially against like particular body types, like big slots. If you want to, like, one of the things that the NFL likes to do is just take those like shots out, like on those slot fades. Like he's going to defend those pretty well at the next level,
Yeah.
I think. So there's a lot to like in terms of like his versatility. I don't know that he has like a true calling card. I don't think he's like a special athlete. I think he's a better athlete than what he tested at. My concern with him, and like one of the ways that I feel like he could bust, even though I do think he's like a relatively safe prospect, is I think the eyes from depth give me a little bit of concern. And maybe that's just like last year, they were putting a lot on his plate and his head was kind of spinning and everything like that. But I do worry a little bit about like just the eyes and him biting on everything and not being where he needs to be. And, you know, as a safety, like you need to be taking away big plays. Like you're supposed to be the last line of defense. And I thought at times there were, you know, some leaks in the back end because of him. So what'd you think about Starks?
So yeah, Starks is safety one for me. I think you hit a lot of like the strengths out of the park. I think he is a jack of all trades, maybe not a master of none. I think the fact I really like him in the slot, just being able to like stay with guys vertically, be able to play the ball, like he gets his head back around like so consistently working vertically. A lot of
Yep.
guys they will panic in that situation. They'll get grabby, and it leads to like a deep defensive pass interference penalty that ends up putting their team in a hole. I like the fact that he doesn't get grabby in those situations. It makes me feel comfortable about him. The play recognition, the FBI, I think that just shows constantly, especially in like years prior where like he's playing more of like a strictly like a safety, like zone safety role where he's just allowed to fill the run, where he's allowed to stay over the top, single high, and be able to like, you know, see those plays developing. I think when he's able to work on his own merit, like in that regard, I think when he's not feeling overwhelmed by all the responsibilities, he
Yeah.
can work as a single high safety. But I think you might need to dumb down the responsibilities a little bit, not have him as much in the slot. I think there's a path for him to be good in the slot and be good as a strong safety as well, because I think he, you know, he fits the run, he takes on blocks extremely well. I think a lot of that works extremely like in his favor. And the reason I'm not like a lot of people have him with like a top 10 type of grade. Like some people even have him like number 4. I don't quite view him that way. Where I view him is I think he's a first round guy in terms of like the things he brings to the table. I think he's just a jack of all trades. I think he's a guy I can really rely on reliably to the point
Yeah.
where I think he can just be a good player at the next level. I think he brings a lot of like versatility, instincts, the way he's able to get guys lined up. It's he is a captain of that team. Like he's been playing on that team since he was a true freshman. I think the fact he got onto the field so early, you know, with Kirby on Kirby Smart's team and had such as big of a role as he did, and the fact he stood out like, you know, amongst like all those talents really speaks
Hmm.
to the type of player that he was. Like he's got incredibly light feet. The way he mirrors from off coverage, I just think he's got like an incredibly smooth pedal. There's no wasted
Oh
steps.
yeah, he's
When
pretty good from a pedal, especially from a for a safety.
Yes, no, he wastes no steps out of his click and close. When he sees something, he is going. Like he will instantly break on something. I remember like it was a play in the against Georgia in the SEC championship back in 2023, and like he's working across the formation. He's working to like this dig route because he sees it coming open, and he just like fires on it immediately, and then like he's able to break up the pass. I just love the way he plays the ball, the way he's so instinctual. I For me, I just think he's just a well-rounded player. He's safe. I could see him in a bunch of different roles. If you want to specialize him, I think if you specialize him, you want to make him more of a single high guy where I think his instincts can really rely on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I to me, he was like kind of like 1B, and I still may like, I don't know. When I finish my like or my safety rankings and actually publish them, the Steelers, now he still might end up number one. I don't quite have a first round grade just because I do agree with a lot of what you're saying. I worry that he's not as reliable like when he gets deeper from depth. But again, some of that could
Right.
be like what you're saying, like let's restrict some of his responsibilities, not put as much on him. But I'm just like looking at the Beast from Dane Brugler. If you guys haven't seen that, definitely check that out. It's a good resource. But looking at I always enjoy like the nuggets that he gets from like interviews from like coaches, like family members, just reading the
Absolutely.
background on the players. It's like the best thing for me. But reading this bullet point from him, genuine leader because of his humble attitude, commitment, secondary coach. He holds people accountable. He holds himself accountable. I think that's his greatest trait. Terrific communicator. Coaches put extra helpings on display by asking to play every position in the secondary. So, I mean, that's one of the things too. Like when you play at a high level as a freshman, I do think that that's something that I always like to note in my scouting report, just because it signals that like, they're like you can handle a lot of new stuff on your plate and still like be able to put your athletic gifts on display. And I feel like Starks like earlier in his career, like that was a little bit more evident than it was this past year. So
Yeah.
um, that kind of does lead me to like my number one player, which is definitely hot take-ish because this is like way above like where he is on the consensus board. But
We're
um,
going to the summer takes.
yeah, I am a huge fan of Kevin Winston. People are gonna think I'm crazy for this, but in part just because Winston tore his ACL this past season. He played one game, but this kid's an absolute baller, man. The 2023 tape it's pretty freaking good. Team captain, 97th percentile wingspan, and he ran a 1.51 10-yard split coming off the ACL surgery. So the fact that he was able to test was why I'm definitely going out on a limb, putting him in this like kind of second round range, a lot higher than where consensus has him right now. But the fact that he was able to test in such a short period coming off the injury, you already talked about like how that kind of transpired, gave me a little bit of comfort in terms of that. But this is just like a tone setter on the defensive side of the ball. I think he's the best run defender in the class. He plays with just insane urgency, takes good angles to the ball, striker on contact. Again, kind of like what I mentioned with Eman Warrior, like he just gets dudes to the ground. I think his length really shows up in that regard. 2023, you mentioned zero missed tackles on 46 attempts. Pretty awesome. I think the number one thing that I like, which you kind of talked about in your strengths too, and I think I'll kind of talk about like different previous prospects that have made me feel really strongly about them that had this similar trait, is just his ability to take on blocks out in space. There's a rep in the West Virginia game this year where they're running outside zone his direction. They had this kind of big slot receiver up there and out to the slot. He climbs up to Winston. Winston takes him on, like jolts him backwards. You see the dude's helmet fly backwards. And then he pushes him backwards like 2 to 3 yards off his spot. And then he keeps his outside arm free and then makes the tackle with his outside arm, gets the dude on the ground 0 yards after contact. And it's just like that stuff is like kind of wow type of stuff that you just don't see a lot at the college level. He's a force in the screen game. He blows up plays in the flat all the time. Very smart player, like you mentioned, good pre-snap communicator. Plenty of range, I feel like, for center field assignments. That wasn't really how he was deployed 2 years ago, but I do think that he can do it. The dude just rarely seems like he's out of position, and I do think that he has the short area burst and the recovery ability to get himself out of compromising spots, like when he did find himself in those spots. So after reading around, I felt like I was wondering kind of like why he wasn't getting a lot of buzz aside from the ACL. Just reading around some other things like in the Beast, things like that. I just think he's more instinctual than I think a lot of people are really giving him credit for, especially for a guy that hasn't played a lot. Now, that does kind of lead into the negatives. He's only played less than 700 snaps in his collegiate career. So we just talked about Starks, Eman, and Warrior. Like those guys have been like known commodities, a lot of experience. Winston doesn't have that. And I do think the small sample size is worth bringing up. there's a slight delay in his back pedal. He could be too upright. There's some false steps, some slips out of his transition phase. I think the closing burst, like I said, can mitigate some of that. But I think that those things are things that can be taught. He's a good mover to the point where I don't think it's going to be a debilitating thing at the next level. Wasn't asked to play a ton of man coverage, although I did think his man coverage ability was pretty good. I thought that he was able to run with crossers, things like that you want out of that position when he did have to come down to the slot. Again, not a ton of reps like that, but there wasn't a lot of ball production. That kind of comes back to the fact that we just don't have big sample size, like ball production, like we've seen with safeties. Like it can kind of come and go. I do think that he found the ball when he was thrown his way, but he didn't get targeted a lot. So we're just, it's a difficult eval just because of the sample size. And I don't know if he has like, from what I've seen, I don't know if I see like a special type of playmaker on the ball. And that was like one of the reasons I didn't have him in the first round, just because we just don't see a lot of first round safeties. I mean, like, was Kyle Hamilton the last guy?
I think he was. Oh wait, no, wasn't Daxton Hill also drafted?
Oh, I guess Daxton was kind of a safety too. I'm trying to think. We don't really usually get a lot of these guys that go in the first round. Now this isn't like a stylistic comp or even like a player comp. I actually don't really know that I have a good one for Winston, the way that he plays, but the way that he plays in space as a tackler reminds me a lot of like the way that I felt about Brian Branch. And Branch is, like, full transparency, like one of my favorite prospects of all time. Like he's one of my better draft hits ever as well.
That's your guy, man. That's that like when they pull up the resume that he just got the my guy, and it's right there with Brian Branch.
And again, different players. I don't think he's as good or as clean of a prospect as Branch was. But the things that I mentioned with the ability to take on blocks, play through trash. This dude, I just feel like he's a day one guy that can come in the box. I mean, I really feel like 2 years ago he could have lined up in the NFL in the box and held his own. Like he's got the body for it, he's got the frame for it. He's like 215 pounds, so like he can get down there and like thump. And I do think that he offers you enough interchangeability on the back end to where he could play single high, he could play two high safety stuff. So I think a lot of people are gonna like look at him and maybe pigeonhole him into a box safety role, and maybe that's all he is. I don't know, but I really do think that there's more upside for him than just that. Just because I think he's smarter and more intellectual, I think, than maybe other people are giving him credit for.
What games would you say were like his best from like a single high alignment? Because I'm curious if I should get a little more, if I should catch a couple more games before
it's not as much like single high, but they do like in the 2023 stuff. I want to say like Michigan might have been one. But they do a lot of like role based stuff where they'll kind of like they'll go 2-1. Like that's what I mean too. Like with him having like that type of versatility, like he can go 2-1, he can go 1-2. So if you want to be a defense that kind of disguises their intentions pre-snap too. But I just think like his movement ability, like you can see the way that he can really get from point A to point B. It is a little bit of a question mark because like you don't see it a ton. Like you're talking about like single digit reps on a game to game basis because most of the time he is near the line of scrimmage. And I understand why they did that, just because like he was pretty, I mean, honestly, pretty dominant.
He's great there.
So
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can get into a evaluation standpoint where it's like I have an early second round grade on him. So it's like, if he's an early second rounder, can you take a guy like that if he's just a box safety? I would understand that argument, but like I struggle to see a situation where like he's not a very good box safety. So I think I do get the high floor, and the reason why I kind of leaned him over Starks is because I do think that there's like a little bit more upside there, just in terms of like maybe there's some stuff there that we haven't had the chance to see yet, just because of the sample size. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair projection. I mean, I was really excited like hearing that you had Winston at 1, because I really didn't know where to put him, because I'm working off the 23 tape and I see what he is as like this awesome like box defender, but I felt like his instincts were good. Like I feel like he had that type of recognition, but I just don't think he got enough to show like, if he could be like able to roll to one high consistently if he was asked to do it, because like when they were rolling to one high in that Michigan game, they were the Michigan was always tight in that game. They consistently played with a tight like alignment, and I was
Yeah.
just not able to like really see his range like working, laterally. So I
Yeah.
definitely want to try and see if I can get a couple more games before I like, put a bow tie on this whole draft process, but he's a very fascinating player. I think he's way safer than a lot of the other guys in this class.
Yeah, and like I kind of do agree with that too. Like there's no such thing as like a safe prospect, but like when I was watching his film, I'm like, there's no way that this dude's not going to be a starter. But I do think that like there's a rep in the Michigan State game that I really like. He's in like off man coverage. They split a tight end out to the I think it's to the boundary, but he's in off man coverage. The tight end tries to like just like bully him
Yeah.
and like run him over, and he just stands his ground and ends up locating the football, knocks the ball away. So he's like one of those players too that's not going to get like pushed off his spot in terms of like if he is playing off coverage. Got like tight ends and stuff aren't going to be able to create that separation at the break point that we often talk about with that position. So, and I do think like one of the things for me is it wasn't a lot, but when he was asked to like run with crossers and stuff like that, man, coverage, I felt like he held up well. So like that's like one of the big things I look for in safeties is like if you can be like a top 50 type of prospect, like can you run with those really difficult assignments? And I felt like he could do it. He had the long speed. So yeah, there's a lot to like, but it's a really good class. I know hopefully this is good content for people. Hopefully everybody, feels a little bit better about the safety class. I think my main takeaway is that like a lot of this class, I don't see it the same way as like I feel like a lot of the consensus does. But this class in general, like I would be really, really trying to get one of these day two safeties, man. Like that's one of the things that I would be looking for if I was if I was a fan of the NFL draft or my team, whatever team it is, man. Like I would be wanting to get one of these days two safeties. I'd probably avoid taking the risk on anybody in the first round. But it's a really fun group. It's been a really blast. Like this will be one of the more interesting classes to look back on evaluation wise, because I'm going to be like, I'm definitely going to be different than consensus. So I'm going to be interested to see like, if I was just way off base or one of those things where I need to like recalibrate my eyes. We'll see. We'll see though. But
I'm kind
we
of curious,
really,
like if my valuation of like Winston, like valuing like the versatility is not going to come back and like be like, oh, you only had him at 5, but it's like I liked him, but yeah, he's
yeah.
like
And that's kind of the
behind all these other
thing
guys.
is I really liked Winston and I like the other four guys. I do think that Eamon Worry is the scariest player on tape, but obviously the traits are like these other guys just aren't freak like Starks, Watts, Bakuba, like weren't freak testers. Like the
Yeah.
thing with Eamon Worry is like the build, the profile, like what could you mold him into? So yeah, I mean, I like all of these guys. Like I said, I would probably just want to be a coward and you guys could just take whoever you think is the top two guys, and I'll take I'll take Kevin Winston at the top of the third round, and I'll feel really, really good about having him on my defense on Sundays. So yeah, really, really interesting episode. We hope you guys enjoy it. On your way out, please make sure that you like, subscribe, drop us a comment, let us know your safety rankings, or any questions that you guys might have about these prospects, and we will check you guys next week. Peace and love.